Okay, so get ready, because today we are diving deep into a story that, well, it proves that truth is often stranger than fiction.
It really is.
We're talking about a true crime saga, and it's still unfolding.
You guys sent in a ton of stuff on the Karen Reed case, clearly want to dive deeper, and you're right to be curious.
Okay, so for those who haven't, followed every detail, let's rewind to the beginning. John O'Keefe was found dead in January 2022,
Right.
outside a home in Canton, Massachusetts. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, was later charged with his death, and Trooper Proctor was the one leading the investigation.
Right.
What we know now
Yeah.
is that behind the scenes, Proctor was anything but impartial.
You're right. During the trial, these explosive text messages from Proctor came out, and you could practically hear jaws hitting the floor.
And these weren't just some offhand comments.
No.
This was straight-up animosity towards Karen Reed.
Yeah.
Actually hoping she'd hurt herself.
Right. A case full of twists and turns. That ultimately ended in a mistrial, which,
Right.
by the way,
Yeah.
is when a jury can't agree on a verdict,
Right.
essentially hitting the reset button on the whole trial.
Exactly. And get this, that mistrial uncovered something pretty shocking.
Yeah.
A pattern of misconduct by the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor.
Right. Trooper Proctor's texts, well, there's something else.
Yeah, you flagged some real head-scratchers.
We're talking thousands of messages sent all hours of the day about the case.
It's a lot.
Even late at night during an active homicide investigation.
And what's even crazier, this isn't just about the Reed case anymore. It's like a bomb went off, and the shrapnel is hitting other cases in Norfolk County.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? We're going to trace how a single officer's actions could potentially unravel years of investigation. He's texting his wife, his sister, fellow troopers,
Wow.
even his high school buddies. It's like, come on, Trooper Proctor, doesn't this case deserve a little focus?
That's what's so strange, right? This isn't just casual chit-chat. We see him actually discussing case details with people outside the investigation.
So unprofessional. I think it's important to be clear about the severity here.
Yeah.
This wasn't just venting frustration. This was a blatant disregard for the presumption of innocence,
Right.
a bedrock of our legal system.
It makes you wonder if this is how he's talking about her privately.
Yeah.
How did this bias play out during the investigation?
Right.
Like, did his feelings actually affect the evidence collected or how witnesses were interviewed?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it cuts to the core of why this case matters so much.
Right.
Remember, this isn't just some theoretical legal debate. This is about real people's lives.
Right.
If Proctor's bias tainted the investigation from the get-go, it calls into question the entire foundation of the case against Karen Reed.
He even jokes with his sister in one text. You won't believe what this lady's defense is.
Unbelievable. It's like he's treating this whole thing like some kind of soap opera. And it
Right.
gets worse, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
You pointed out those messages where he calls Karen Reed names like whack job, makes fun of her appearance. It's just disrespectful.
Yeah, and not only disrespectful, but potentially damaging to the prosecution's case.
Yeah.
This is the lead investigator. We got to remember that.
Exactly. His objectivity is paramount.
Right. And when he's sending texts like, can't wait to lock this one up, even before the trial started,
Yikes.
it really makes you question his impartiality.
It's like he's already decided she's guilty. And he's sharing these opinions so freely, not just with friends and family, but with other troopers too.
Yeah.
You highlighted one exchange where he says to a colleague, "Don't worry, we'll get her. She's toast."
Not exactly the language of an impartial investigator. These texts, even though Proctor claims they were juvenile and didn't actually impact his work, they still paint a concerning picture of his mindset. It seems like he's more focused on getting that conviction than making sure the investigation is fair and impartial.
It's like he's playing for one team and it's not the justice team. You have to wonder, if this is how he's talking about the case privately, what was his demeanor like during the actual investigation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? These texts give us a glimpse into his thinking, but they make you wonder about the integrity of the whole investigation. If he's this comfortable sharing these opinions with others, what does that say about his judgment, his professionalism?
It's a wild ride through these texts, and we're just getting started. And speaking of questionable judgment, let's talk about the Canton Police Department. You flagged this in your notes.
Yeah.
And for good reason, it's confusing, to say the least.
It really is. They were supposed to be completely out of the picture, officially recused,
Right.
because of a conflict of interest.
Totally.
Yet here we are looking at texts between Proctor and officers from that very department.
It's like they were told to stay away from the cookie jar, but they couldn't resist sneaking a few bites.
Exactly.
You highlighted one exchange in particular that caught my eye. Proctor texts a Canton officer after a night out asking for his address.
Right.
So weird.
It is a seemingly small detail, but in the context of a recused department, it raises a lot of red flags.
For sure, why involve them at all, even for something as simple as getting an address?
Right. It just muddies the waters and makes you question the whole investigation, you know?
You're right. It's those seemingly insignificant details that can sometimes unravel a whole case.
Totally.
And speaking of unraveling, let's talk about the missing video footage.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
This is what we in the business call a crucial plot twist.
Okay.
Key footage from the night of the incident just gone.
What?
We're talking about footage of Karen Reed arriving home, the discovery of that broken taillight moments that could be really important for context.
Wow, so it's like someone hit the delete button at the worst possible time.
Right, and you flagged this in your notes, and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
This isn't just a matter of lost footage. These are missing pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly.
And the fact that there is no clear explanation for why these videos are missing is even more concerning.
Right.
Was it just an oversight, a technical glitch, or something more deliberate?
Yeah.
These unanswered questions cast a huge shadow over the investigation.
It really makes you wonder what was on those videos that made them disappear. Was there something or someone those videos might have shown that someone didn't want us to see?
It's impossible to say for sure, but the disappearance of potentially crucial evidence always raises serious questions about the integrity and thoroughness of an investigation.
It's like trying to solve a mystery when half the pages of the book are ripped out.
Right.
You're left with more questions than answers.
And that's why this detail that you noticed is so important.
Yeah.
It really undermines the narrative the prosecution is trying to build.
Okay.
It makes you question everything.
You're right. This isn't just about missing footage. It's about missing trust.
Exactly.
Trust in the evidence, trust in the process, and ultimately, trust in the pursuit of justice.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And speaking of trust, right, let's talk about Brian Higgins. You highlighted his text messages with Karen Reed, this flirtatious relationship. It's like a whole other thing in this story.
Right, and you pointed out he only handed over a few messages to investigators.
So strange.
It makes you wonder what was in the rest of those messages.
Exactly.
And were investigators even curious?
Yeah, did anyone ask to see everything? Or try to even check his story out?
Right.
It's like he was allowed to tell his own story, you know?
That's the thing about these big investigations, especially one like this.
Totally.
It's not just the evidence they give you, it's what's missing.
Right.
The questions that just aren't answered.
Yes.
And in this case, there are a lot of those.
A lot.
A lot of unanswered questions.
It's like trying to do a puzzle, but someone switched half the pieces out for different ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You might get a picture, but it's not the right one.
Exactly. And that's why what you're doing is so important.
Oh, yeah.
You're picking up on a pattern here.
Yeah.
From those biased texts we talked about
Right.
to the camp police being kind of shady.
Right.
And then the missing videos.
Yeah.
It just feels like something's off.
It does. It feels like when someone's not telling the whole story.
Exactly.
Like, something's wrong. I don't like it.
And in this case, it's so important to pay attention to that feeling.
Right.
Because the stakes are so high.
Oh, yeah.
Those inconsistencies, those gut feelings,
Yeah.
they mean something.
Okay.
It's not about just saying, oh, they're guilty. It's about asking the hard questions.
Right.
The ones that might be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but lead to a different way of looking at what happened.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Remember the Brian Walsh case?
Uh-huh.
The one where he's accused of killing his wife, Anna Walsh.
Oh, absolutely. That case is just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And terrifying, honestly.
And guess who was the lead investigator in that case, too?
Don't tell me. Trooper Proctor.
You got it.
Oh, my gosh.
So now you have these two high-profile murder cases, both with Proctor at the helm, and this dark cloud of bias hanging over his head.
Right.
It makes you question everything, doesn't it?
Seriously. If he could be this openly biased in the Reed case, what does it say about his handling of the Walsh investigation?
Exactly. And the defense in the Walsh case is thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They're going after Proctor's phone records, his emails, basically anything that might show a similar pattern of bias against Anna Walsh.
Wow. Imagine if they find something. This could blow the entire case wide open.
Yeah. It's like a domino effect.
Right.
One investigation calling another into question. So where does this leave the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office? They were so quick to defend Proctor at first.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Initially, they brushed off those texts as simply unprofessional.
Right.
Like it's no big deal. It seemed like they were more worried about bad press than actual justice.
Yeah.
But, public pressure is a powerful thing.
Yeah, people were outraged. And rightfully so. You can't just ignore that kind of blatant bias, especially from someone in a position of authority.
Right. And now the DA's office is in a tough spot.
Yeah.
They're saying they can't release Proctor's full phone records because it might jeopardize other ongoing cases. So which is it? Protecting their own or protecting justice? It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
It really highlights the complexities of the legal system.
Right.
On one hand, you have to maintain the integrity of ongoing investigations.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have to ensure a fair trial for everyone, even if it means exposing potential misconduct by law enforcement.
Right. And let's not forget the human cost of all of this.
Right.
These aren't just abstract legal battles.
Yeah.
They're about real people who've lost loved ones.
Yeah.
How can families have faith in the system when there's even a hint of doubt about the impartiality of the investigation?
Exactly.
You know, it makes you think, if these high-profile cases are being shaken to their core like this, what about all the other cases Proctor worked on?
Right.
The ones that didn't make headlines. It sends chills down your spine.
It's a sobering thought, right? I mean, we put so much trust in law enforcement to be fair and impartial.
Right.
But this case really exposes the very human flaws that can seep into any system.
It's like, who investigates the investigators,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
How can we be sure that this isn't more common than we'd like to think?
And that's why this deep dive is so crucial, right? I mean, we're not just talking about one rogue cop here.
Right.
We're talking about the potential for systemic issues that erode public trust in the entire justice system.
It really makes you appreciate the power of social media and citizen journalism.
Right.
The Karen Reed case blew up online.
Yeah.
You know, it forced people to pay attention, pushing for accountability.
Absolutely. Without that public pressure, those texts might never have seen the light of day.
Right. It's kind of wild when you think about it, right? We always hear about justice and fairness, but what happens when the people we trust to uphold those ideals, well, what happens when they become the ones under scrutiny?
Yeah, it really makes you question everything.
That's exactly what's happening right now in Norfolk County, Massachusetts. Two high-profile murder cases, Karen Reed and Brian Walsh. Totally separate, no connection between the victims or anything, but there's this one link between them that's sending shockwaves through the system.
And that link is Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in both cases. Talk about a bombshell.
And to add fuel to the fire, the Reed case just ended in a mistrial, while Walshy is still waiting for his day in court.
The timing of all this couldn't be more crucial.
So what went down during the Reed trial that's got everyone talking? It's all about some text messages, right?
Text messages that raise some serious red flags about Trooper Proctor's conduct during the investigation.
Like, what kind of red flags are we talking about?
We're talking about messages where he uses derogatory language to describe Karen Reed, even going as far as saying he hopes she commits suicide.
Oh, wow. That's really disturbing.
And it gets worse. There are texts about him looking through her phone, making inappropriate comments about what he found.
He's boasting about going through her personal phone. Seriously. That's a huge invasion of privacy.
A blatant disregard for her rights and a clear indication of bias, which is, well, it's pretty alarming for a lead investigator.
You would think someone would have stepped in, right? Did no one report this?
It actually took a while for these messages to surface, and once they did, it triggered an internal affairs investigation.
So there are already consequences within the police department itself.
Exactly. Sergeant Yuri Buchanan even faced disciplinary action for not reporting the messages.
It makes you wonder how deep this goes. And, of course, Reed's defense team is claiming a police cover-up.
Those text messages are like a gift for the defense. They feed directly into their narrative of a biased investigation.
So what does this mean for the prosecution? They're in a difficult position, right?
Absolutely. They're trying to balance the need for a fair trial, which might mean releasing all of Proctor's phone records, with the potential harm to other cases if they do. It's a tough call.
Transparency versus protecting ongoing investigations. It's a classic dilemma. But it makes you wonder, how far does this rabbit hole go?
And that leads us to the Brian Walsh case.
So we're already looking at potential misconduct in 2 murder investigations.
And it might not stop there.
Really? Are there other cases Trooper Proctor worked on in Norfolk County?
Oh, yeah. Quite a few, actually.
Okay, so this could be much bigger than just these 2 cases then.
Could be, yeah.
That's really unsettling to think about. Do any specific cases come to mind?
Well, the one that's got everyone talking is the Anna Walsh case.
Right. Brian Walsh's wife. He's awaiting trial for her murder, isn't he?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And guess who was one of the lead investigators?
Trooper Proctor.
You got it.
So even though Walsh has already been indicted, all this stuff about Proctor could still impact his case.
Oh, absolutely. His lawyers are all over this.
I bet they are. They must be seeing this as a real opportunity.
Of course. They're going to use anything they can to create doubt.
I mean, wouldn't you if you were in their shoes? It's got to be tough for the DA's office, too. They're probably worried about this affecting other cases as well.
Absolutely. That's their big argument against releasing everything from Proctor's phone.
They're worried about hurting other cases, maybe even some that are still open.
Exactly. They say it could compromise those investigations.
And they're worried about the privacy of people who aren't even involved in these cases, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that. It's a tough spot for them. They got to walk a fine line here.
For sure.
On one hand, you've got the right to a fair trial and the need for transparency.
Right.
But on the other, they have to protect the integrity of other investigations and people's privacy.
It's a tough balance, no doubt about it.
It's a real mess, and it makes you wonder how something like this could even happen.
It really does.
Like, what was going on within the DA's office? Within the state police? Was there no oversight?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Was there pressure to close cases quickly, maybe leading to tunnel vision, or worse?
Those are the questions everyone's asking.
And those are important questions.
Yeah.
This isn't just about these cases, it's about the whole system.
Exactly.
And it's about people's lives.
Yeah.
We're talking about potential mistrials, overturned convictions,
Right.
innocent people who might be in prison right now because of this.
It's a heavy thing to consider, that's for sure.
It really is. This goes way beyond just a few bad apples. This cuts to the heart of our justice system.
I agree.
It makes you question whether everyone is really treated equally under the law.
It's a question we have to ask.
It's just, I don't know, it's almost unbelievable. Like a couple of text messages could unravel everything.
That's what's so, I don't know, almost poetic about it. Like, it just highlights how fragile trust is, especially when it comes to something like law enforcement.
Right. This isn't just about, like, a few bad apples.
It's about the system itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So where do we even go from here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, how do we make sure investigations are impartial? How do we root out bias?
It's a lot to unpack. It's
Yeah.
like we all have a part to play in this.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We need to be engaged, informed. We have to hold people accountable.
And not just, in Norfolk County. This is bigger than that.
This is about the very core of our justice system, right? Everyone deserves a fair shot no matter what.
It's easy to forget that when you get caught up in the legal back and forth, but this is about real people.
Real people with real lives.
Families, communities, they're all affected by this. And what does it even mean for the future of law enforcement? How do you even begin to rebuild trust after something like this?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And I don't think there's an easy answer.
So where do we go from here? How do we fix this? How do we make sure that everyone, gets a fair shake, regardless of what an investigator might personally think of them?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. But this case highlights the urgent need for greater transparency and accountability within law enforcement. We need stricter protocols for identifying and addressing potential bias, better training for officers, and independent oversight to investigate potential misconduct.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But it starts with acknowledging the problem, right?
Right, exactly.
We can't fix what we don't acknowledge.
Right.
And this case has ripped the Band-Aid off a wound that's been festering for a long time.
Exactly. And it's a conversation that needs to continue. The ramifications of Trooper Proctor's actions will continue to ripple through the Norfolk County justice system and beyond.
And as for Karen Reed, she's still awaiting her fate with a new trial on the horizon.
Right.
And in the Walshka case, the defense will undoubtedly continue to probe for any sign that Proctor's misconduct might have tainted their investigation.
It just goes to show you, the pursuit of justice is rarely straightforward. It's messy, it's complex, and sometimes it's downright disheartening.
Wow.
But cases like this remind us why it's so important to keep asking tough questions, demanding better from the system, and fighting for a justice system that truly lives up to its name.
This whole situation really makes you think, doesn't it? If a case as seemingly clear-cut as Karen Reed's can be thrown into turmoil by such blatant bias, what does this say about all the other cases out there? It really underscores the importance of due process, the presumption of innocence, and the constant pursuit of truth and justice. And that's something we should all be thinking about, not just in Norfolk County, but everywhere.
Well said.
This has been a crazy deep dive into the Karen Reed case and the aftershocks that are still being felt today.
But it has to start with accountability, transparency, a real commitment to justice. And those aren't just words. They have to be backed up with action.
It's a reminder that justice is, well, it's complicated, it's messy, and we always have to question to push for better.
It's a process, and the story is far from over. I'm sure there are more twists and turns to come.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been, well, eye-opening to say the least.
Absolutely.
And it's a stark reminder that the fight for justice, it never really ends.